The last can of cold beans tasted like failure. Julian spooned the congealed tomato sauce into his mouth, the metallic tang coating his tongue. 6 months, 184 days in this musty Atlanta basement. His world shrunk to the 15-inch glow of a laptop screen and the slow depletion of a pantry. The air, thick with the scent of damp concrete and his own unwashed fear, was the only thing he had in abundance. A floorboard groaned in the house above him. He froze, spoon halfway to his mouth. The pistol on the floor beside him was a lump of cold, unfamiliar iron. His hand, a thing of trembling skin and bone, found the checkered grip. He was a virologist, a man whose life had been spent with pipettes and microscopes. The weight of the weapon felt like a blasphemy. Tucked inside his threadbare CDC windbreaker, a hard rectangle pressed against his ribs. The Osiris Key. He had grabbed it from the lab during the fall, a final, reflexive act of self-preservation, or perhaps self-destruction. The encrypted data slate held everything. All his research, all the models, the entire ugly genesis of the origin strain. It was the proof of his sin. And it was the only device in the world that could access the CDC servers in Colorado and burn his work from existence. A screech tore through the night outside, a sound that started as human and ended as something else entirely. It was closer this time. They were learning, adapting. He had programmed them too. His time here was over. He had to run. Dawn broke not with light, but with a slow dilution of the dark. Julian moved through the ruin of his own neighborhood. He was a ghost haunting the landscape of his guilt. Weeds, thick as fists, burst through the asphalt of manicured driveways. Mailboxes stood open like gaping mouths, spilling sun-bleached letters onto lawns that had turned into wild meadows. He stayed off the main roads. He knew the initial infection vectors, the houses where the first fevers had spiked, the cul-de-sacs that had become charnel pits in the first 72 hours. This was his singular shameful advantage. He knew the layout of the plague because he was its architect. He found it 2 blocks over, a National Guard Humvee parked halfway on a curb, its door slightly ajar. Abandoned. He slid inside, the interior smelling of stale coffee and gunpowder. His fingers, clumsy and slow, found the wires beneath the ignition column. He had read the theory, watched the videos during the long, dark hours in the basement. A spark, a cough, and the engine roared to life, a monstrous noise in the dead silence. On the dash was a military-grade comms panel. A foolish, desperate hope surged in him, a need to know he was not the last man alive. He fiddled with the knobs, twisting through channels of pure static. Then, a voice cut through the hiss. It was disciplined. Clear. Repeat. All teams. Transponder signal is on the move. Grid 7. We are still searching for Dr. Julian Vance. Intel confirms his target is the CDC Foothills campus. He is the key. Secure him at all costs. Julian's blood went cold. He knew that voice. The clipped, precise cadence. The utter lack of inflection. Dr. Lena Petrova. His protégé, his friend. She was alive. She was organized. And she was hunting him. The Humvee died 20 miles out, coughing its last breath near the skeletal remains of what was once a CDC rally point. A flimsy checkpoint, now just a few sandbags and overturned tables. He thought he might find a vehicle, supplies, a way to disappear before Lena's net closed around him. The outpost was ransacked, papers fluttering like dead leaves in the breeze. But one thing was untouched. A single folding desk stood in the center of the disarray, clean and deliberate. On its surface lay a map of the United States. A red line, drawn with a ruler's precision, started in his own suburban neighborhood and ended exactly where he now stood. Next to it was a folded note. He recognized the handwriting instantly, each letter a sharp, perfect peak. Don't make me do this. Chi. Pinned beneath the note was a photograph, recent. His wife Sarah and his daughter Maya, their faces thin but their smiles real. Lena stood behind them, her arm around Maya. She was Maya's godmother. This was not a mission, this was a message. an exorcism. He staggered back, his hand flying to his jacket, to the hard rectangle pressing against his ribs. The Osiris Key. It was his absolution, the tool to erase his legacy. He felt the sudden, sickening certainty. The transponder signal. She wasn't tracking his route, she was tracking the key. The one thing he had saved, the one thing he thought would save him, was a leash, pulling her directly to his throat. The choice he had been agonizing over for months, the desperate gamble of a cross-country run, was no longer his to make. He had to get to that lab. He had to get there before she got to him. The world was full of monsters that shrieked in the night, but he was running from the one who knew his name. How do you run from someone who is following your very soul? The dead called it the Steel River. Interstate 80, a 4-lane monument to the world's last traffic jam. Julian walked the center line, a ghost on a pilgrimage of rust. Vehicles sat in a silent, permanent communion, their metal skins baked and peeling. Some were scorched black, hollowed husks that moaned when the wind blew. Others were pocked with the craters of small arms fire. Most just sat, doors agape, personal effects scattered and bleached by the sun. It was an oppressive quiet, the kind that presses in on your eardrums. He traded his last full bottle of water and a silver locket he found in a glove box for a pickup truck with 3 good tires and one that was mostly wishful thinking. The man who made the trade had eyes like chipped gravel and a smile that never formed. He just grunted, took the water, and pointed. The truck coughed to life in a cloud of blue smoke. The journey west was an education in a language he did not want to learn. The world flattened into an endless canvas of brown grass and pale sky. Out here, the shriekers were different. Not the things that shuffled through dark city alleys, but sleek, horrifyingly fast predators. They hunted in packs, flowing over the plains like heat shimmer, and Julian learned to drive without lights, to sleep in 20-minute increments with the engine running, and to recognize the distant, chittering calls that signaled a hunt. The humans were worse. Small clusters of them, holed up in burnt-out gas stations, watching the road with hungry eyes. He never stopped. The truck died in rural Kansas. It was not a dramatic failure, just a sputter, a cough, a final shuddering sigh. The silence that followed was absolute. He got out and stood in the sea of dying corn, the setting sun painting the horizon in strokes of blood orange and bruised purple. In the distance, a single point of light flickered, a star fallen to earth. Hope was a dangerous, stupid thing. He walked toward it anyway. It took him 2 hours. The light resolved into the glare of bare bulbs strung between 3 colossal grain silos and a cluster of smaller buildings. The whole complex was ringed by a high, ugly wall of welded car chassis and sharpened scrap metal, a fortress. He approached the gate, a reinforced cattle guard flanked by 2 watch posts and a voice cut through the night. That's far enough. A figure leaned out from one of the posts, cradling a rifle. Julian stopped, raising his empty hands. The dust on his glasses blurred the light into a hazy corona. I need shelter, just for the night. The gate creaked open just enough for a woman to step out. She was dressed in canvas and denim, sleeves rolled up to reveal sinewy forearms. A pale scar cut vertically through one eyebrow, giving her a look of permanent, mild surprise that was entirely at odds with the way she held her lever-action rifle. "We're full up," she said. Her voice was flat, worn smooth by exhaustion. "I can be useful," Julian heard himself say, the words tasting like ash. "I'm a physician." The lie was flimsy, a suit of armor made from paper. He had studied virology, a world of electron microscopes and sterile labs. He had not touched a living patient in 15 years. The woman stepped closer, into the spill of light. Her eyes, dark and intelligent, scanned him from head to foot. They lingered on his hands. "Your hands are clean." It was not a question. "Your face is peeling like a tourist's. You don't look like you've done a day's real work out here." Julian's heart hammered against his ribs. "I've been careful. I was in a research facility until a few weeks ago." She stared at him for a long moment, the silence stretching thin. He could feel the eyes from the watchposts on him. He was a variable, an unknown quantity to be solved. Finally, she gave a short, sharp nod. "Fine. One night." You try anything, we put you back outside for the screamers. My name is Maya." She let him in, and Julian found himself in a pocket of fragile, stubborn life. The air smelled of wood smoke, pig manure, and the sharp tang of generator exhaust. People moved in the yellow light, their faces smudged with dirt, their eyes holding the same weary caution as Maya's. It was a community humming with the low frequency of survival. It felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a cage. His attempt to be useful was a catastrophe. The next afternoon, a child fell ill. A small boy with big, dark eyes and a fever that left him slick with sweat. He was shivering uncontrollably on a cot in the main silo, his mother holding his hand and murmuring soft reassurances. Julian saw his chance, a way to legitimize his lie. He knelt by the cot, his mind racing. Fever. Tremors. He felt the boy's forehead. It was burning. The diagnosis came to him not as a product of medical deduction, but as an article of faith, a confession of his own sin. It had to be a variant, a neurological degradation caused by a mutated strain of his own creation. The guilt was a physical thing, coiling in his gut. He was looking at his own work. "It's neurological," he announced, his voice carrying a false authority that grated even in his own ears. "The fever is a secondary symptom. The tremors indicate a protein misfolding in the brainstem. We need to induce a hypothermic state to slow the process." He was about to suggest a catastrophic course of treatment involving ice baths and immobility when a hand shoved him, hard. He stumbled back, tripping over a crate. Maya stood over the boy, her face a mask of contempt. "It's a goddamn infection, you idiot." She ripped open a medical kit, her movements sure and practiced. She pulled out a small vial and a syringe. "He cut his leg on some rusted metal 2 days ago. It's festering." She deftly administered a shot of antibiotics into the boy's thigh. "Get him out of here," she said to no one in particular, but everyone heard. Julian scrambled to his feet, the heat of shame crawling up his neck. The whispers of the onlookers were like lashes. He was not just useless, he was a fool. An arrogant fool whose intellect was a liability. He had become an object of scorn. That night, the chittering started. It began as a faint, high-pitched sound at the edge of hearing, then grew, multiplying into a chorus of interlocking clicks and shrieks. Julian was in a small storeroom he had claimed as his own, and the sound froze the blood in his veins. He didn't run to the wall to help. He wedged the door shut with a sack of grain and slid down to the floor, wrapping his arms around his knees. He was paralyzed. Through a crack in the wooden door, he watched the battle unfold in fractured, terrifying glimpses. The pop of rifles, the deep thud of Maya's lever action, the screams of people he had shared a meal with hours before, cut short by a wet, tearing sound. He saw the shriekers, blurs of motion in the flickering light, all teeth and claws and impossible speed. He saw the brutal, bloody arithmetic of survival, and he saw the faces of the people his plague had condemned to this. Then he saw her. A little girl, no older than 9, standing in the doorway of a nearby building. She was small and thin, her face smudged with grime. Maya's niece, Anna. She wasn't screaming or crying, she was just watching the slaughter with wide, terrified eyes. It was a familiar terror. She looked over, and for a second her gaze met his through the crack in the door. It wasn't an accusation, it was just a look. The look of a child living in the world he had made. The image shattered something inside him, some last wall of intellectual detachment. This was the human cost, and it was looking right at him. A section of the scrap wall buckled, torn open by the sheer weight of the horde. The defenders' line broke. The shriekers poured in. Just as the last of the hope bled out of the night, a new sound cut through the chaos. It was not the rattle of the silo's generator, or the crack of its rifles. It was the deep, coordinated rumble of military-grade engines. 2 armored vehicles slammed through the main gate, their massive forms shoving wreckage aside. Banks of floodlights on their roofs ignited, bleaching all color from the scene and casting long, dancing shadows. The world became a stark stage of black and blinding white. Figures in clean black tactical gear disembarked, moving with chilling efficiency. They dispatched the remaining shriekers with controlled bursts from their rifles, the sounds sharp and clinical. Julian watched, mesmerized by the terrible, beautiful order of it all. A figure stood in the open hatch of the lead vehicle, haloed by the light. A woman in a gray CDC jumpsuit under her tactical vest, her dark hair in a severe, perfect bun. Dr. Lena Petrova. A loudspeaker crackled to life, and her voice boomed across the compound, devoid of warmth, stripped of everything but purpose. "We are looking for Dr. Julian Vance. He is a person of interest in ending this plague. Surrender him, and we will provide you with food, fuel, and medical supplies." The floodlights pinned Julian where he stood, half out of the storeroom. The fighting was over. An unnerving silence fell. He looked at Maya, standing near the broken wall, her rifle hanging loosely in her hand. He expected to see cold calculation, but he saw something else. He saw the pragmatic grief of a leader who had made hard choices before and knew she would have to make them again. Her gaze flickered for a single, brief moment over to her niece Anna, who was now clinging to her leg, dirty and tired. Then her eyes locked back onto him. The choice was already made. He was not a guest. He was not a failed physician. He was a commodity. The rifle did not waver. It was a part of her, an extension of her will, its dark metal muzzle, a single, unblinking eye trained on his chest. The storage room smelled of ozone and rust, a metallic tang that coated the back of Julian's throat. A single fluorescent tube overhead sizzled, a dying insect casting their shadows long and skeletal against the corrugated steel. He could feel the cold of the wall through his thin flannel shirt. Trapped. The word was a physical thing, a stone in his gut. Maya's face was a mask of placid assessment. The scar through her eyebrow was a pale slash in the sickly light. Her calm was more terrifying than any rage. It was the calm of a butcher contemplating a side of beef. "One more time," she said, her voice stripped of inflection. "Who are you, and why does a woman with military-grade resources want you so badly?" His heart hammered a frantic, useless rhythm against his ribs. His mind, a frantic rat in a maze, slammed against one dead end after another. "Tell the truth. I'm the man who broke the world." He would be dead before the words finished leaving his mouth. Another lie? She would see through it. Her eyes were chips of obsidian, missing nothing. He needed a story that fit the shape of her world, a key for the lock of her cynicism. The words came before the thought, a survival reflex dredged from the deepest, most cowardly part of him. "I'm a virologist." It tore from his throat, raw and unpracticed. "CDC. My name is Julian Vance." He saw a flicker in her eyes. Not belief, recognition. Lena must have used his name. "I didn't create the virus," he lied, the words gaining a desperate momentum. He let the tremble in his hands become part of the performance. He pushed his smudged glasses up his nose, a gesture he hoped looked academic, harried. "I was part of the team that discovered it. My research, it was supposed to be for containment protocols, vaccines. But there was an off-books faction. They saw its potential. They weaponized it." He took a ragged breath, leaning into the fiction, letting it clothe him. "Lena Petrova ran that faction. She was my superior. I tried to blow the whistle, to leak the data. Before I could, the breach happened. It all went to hell." He met her gaze, forcing a fire of false conviction into his own. "She's not hunting me for justice, Maya. She's hunting me because I'm the loose end. I know what she did, and the data she thinks I still have. It's not for a cure." His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, a sound that barely carried over the hum of the generator. "She's looking for the weapon. The original, stable strain. In a world with no governments left, the woman who controls that is the most powerful person on Earth." The lie settled in the stale air between them. It was a good lie. It was elegant. It fed on the truth of this broken world, that in the vacuum of power, monsters would always rise, and they would always wear the old uniforms. To a woman like Maya, who had seen nothing but failure and betrayal from the authorities that were, the story was more plausible than the truth. She watched him, her head tilted slightly. The rifle's muzzle did not move. He could see her weighing the equation. One man, a potential asset, a potential liar. or a deal with a well-supplied force that could offer her people more than he ever could. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, he thought he had failed. Then, with a crisp, economical motion, she lowered the rifle. "There's a service gate at the back of the bay," she said. "An old Jeep. Keys are in it. I'll give you 5 minutes." She jerked her head toward the door. "Go." He didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled past her, his limbs clumsy with adrenaline. As he reached the door, he heard a single, sharp crack of her rifle firing into the ceiling, followed by a shouted curse. The diversion. A pang of something sour, like guilt, twisted in his stomach for what she was risking. He crushed it. Survival was a hungry god, and it demanded sacrifices. The night air was a shock of cold against his sweat-slicked skin. The Jeep was there, just as she'd said, a hulking relic half swallowed by shadows. He fumbled the door open, slid behind the wheel. The keys were in the ignition. He turned them, and the engine grumbled to life with a reluctant roar. He didn't dare turn on the headlights. He navigated the compound by moonlight, his heart a frantic drum against his sternum, until he found the back gate and the cracked asphalt beyond. He was on the road. The silo shrank in his rearview mirror, a memory. The vast, empty plains of Kansas unspooled before him. On the far horizon, a smudge of deeper black against the star-dusted sky, were the first hints of the mountains. Fort Collins. Safety. He had done it. He had outsmarted them all. The relief was so profound it felt like a sickness, a hollow, trembling thing in his chest. He had played on Maya's cynicism, and she had bought it. He had outmaneuvered Lena. He was free. The engine coughed, sputtered, died. The Jeep coasted to a silent, perfect stop. The sudden stillness was absolute, and then the world went white. Headlights, impossibly bright, erupted from the darkness ahead, pinning him in their glare. More lights flashed in his mirrors, boxing him in from behind. He was caught in a cage of light, the Jeep's cab an illuminated stage. He could see now where he was. The road had dipped into a shallow, rocky canyon, a natural bottleneck, a perfect trap. A car door slammed. A figure emerged from the forward glare, walking slowly toward him. Even in silhouette, he knew the severe posture, the determined stride. Lena. The truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. Maya hadn't bought his story. She had sold it. She had used his frantic escape to confirm his identity to Lena, to prove she had the asset, the kill switch on the engine. The perfectly orchestrated ambush. It was a transaction. His life, bartered for fuel, for medicine, for a future he would never be part of. He watched Lena approach, his hands frozen on the steering wheel. Her tactical gear was coated in a fine layer of dust. Stray strands of dark hair had escaped their bun, softened the hard line of her face. As she drew closer, he saw her expression, and it was not the triumphant glare of a hunter. Her weapon was lowered, her eyes were wide, her face a mask of desperate, pleading hope. She stopped a few feet from his door. "Julian, it's over. Stop running," she said. Her voice was strained, not with anger, but with an exhaustion that seemed bone deep. "Please, help me fix this." The words made no sense. He stared at her, the blood draining from his face, a cold dread seeping into his veins that was far worse than the fear of any bullet. "I accessed your encrypted project files," she continued, her gaze boring into him, searching for something. "The off-the-books research, the Osiris Key." The name of his secret project, a piece of academic arrogance, sounded like a prayer on her lips. "I know you, Julian. The man who held my goddaughter at her christening. You were arrogant, a bastard to work with, but you weren't a monster." Her voice cracked, a fissure in her composure. "You would have built in a failsafe. You had to. A corresponding vaccine. A cure. That's what the Osiris Key unlocks." He looked from her pleading face, illuminated in the stark headlights, to the dark shapes of the soldiers surrounding them, weapons held at a casual ready. He saw her desperate, grieving faith reflected in their stoic watchfulness. She had not been chasing a criminal to bring him to justice. She had been on a pilgrimage, chasing a phantom of his conscience, a testament to a goodness he had never possessed. The true nature of his prison became horribly clear. He was no longer a fugitive running from the law. He was a messiah, shackled by a faith he could not possibly fulfill, being dragged toward his own fraudulent miracle. The worn rubber soles of his shoes made no sound against the polished linoleum. Someone else's shoes, someone else's life. The CDC jumpsuit they had forced him into hung from his shoulders, a thin sack of fabric for a body that had forgotten the purpose of food. It felt like a burial shroud. He walked. Lena Petrova's hand was a firm, unyielding pressure on his upper arm, steering him through the sterile twilight of the corridors. Two of her soldiers flanked them, rifles held low and ready. This place was a tomb of his own making. The CDC Foothills campus, once a vibrant hub of discovery, now ran on the quiet hum of emergency power. Cold blue-white light strips cast their shadows long and skeletal down the empty halls. The air, still and recycled, carried the ghost of antiseptic and the sharp, clean scent of ozone from the straining generators. It was a walk through his own past, a museum of his sins. They rounded a corner into the main atrium, a vast, cavernous space where a single light source dominated the gloom. A large digital screen mounted on the far wall glowed, its light washing over the silent reception desks and empty waiting areas. It cycled through images, high-resolution portraits of smiling men and women. Names appeared in clean, white text beneath each face. Dr. Eris Thorne. Immunology. Julian remembered the way Eris always brought donuts on Fridays, his laugh echoing in the break room. Dr. Elara Sharma. Virology. Elara used to steal his favorite pens from his desk, a playful glint in her dark eyes. Dr. Kenji Tanaka. Cellular biology. Kenji had 2 daughters. He kept their crayon drawings taped to his monitor. The screen refreshed. A new face, a new name, a new person he had personally, intimately, killed. The abstract horror of a global pandemic, a concept too vast to comprehend, collapsed into this. A gallery of individual faces. An honor roll of the damned, with him as its unseen curator. The trembling that had lived in his hands for months simply ceased. The knot of anxiety that had taken permanent residence in his stomach uncoiled and dissolved into nothing. There would be no redemption. He could not unkill these people, could not unring the bell of his monumental failure. The thought was not a source of despair. It was a release. A cold, quiet clarity settled over him. There was only one moral act left to perform. He could not erase his name from history, but he could erase the work itself. "This way," Lena said, her voice tight with anticipation. She pulled him toward the heavy steel doors marked with a level 4 biohazard symbol, Biosafety LEL 4, restricted access. The BSL-4 hot suite, the heart of his sin. Inside, the world was a cage of reinforced glass and stainless steel. Biosafety cabinets stood like silent sentinels. Inert centrifuges and computer consoles waited for hands that would never touch them again. Lena guided him to the central console, her grip finally releasing his arm. Her whole body vibrated with a manic energy. A coil of desperate hope wound to its breaking point. Her eyes burned. "This is it," she breathed, her voice a raw whisper. "Everything we fought for, everything I've done." Then the world shattered. A piercing shriek, electronic and inhuman, ripped through